guys. I am laying here in bed, and for whatever reason I'm freezing cold today, so I've got a hat on and blankets even though I'm in bed. And I was answering a few questions earlier, and some things popped up in my Facebook feed from a plant group, and there were questions about lithops, and so I was looking over them and just seeing the huge variety of answers that these posts get on pretty much all topics. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to make a little video on the marks basically of bad advice and how to tell, and what you can do about it, and how to kind of make sure and get the information that's the most accurate possible. So kind of how to vet your information, if that makes sense. Not in any complicated way, just in a really easy way, like for Facebook groups and situations like that. So for Facebook groups, the first thing I would say that is kind of a hallmark of bad advice is blanket statements. And people love blanket statements, right? But examples would be lithops only need to be watered 4 times a year. Or never plant a succulent in a pot without drainage. And the reason this is kind of a hallmark of bad advice, which again, bad advice is not most often not ill-intended, it's just incorrect. And so the reason that is a big red flag is because the more a person knows about any subject really, but we'll just use our category here for now, about succulents, the more they realize how many variables there are in any given situation, and their answers will be detailed. Like, well, for me, you know, I would say, no, it's not generally recommended to plant succulents in a glass container without drainage, because it makes it a lot easier to overwater, especially for beginners. So if someone said, hey, can I plant succulents, you know, in a container without drainage, rather than just saying never put a succulent in a container without drainage, I would give an explanation like that would give them a little bit of information. Because if you know the danger is that you will overwater, then there are ways around that. You can plant your plant if you're just dying to put something, you know, in a glass globe or whatever. You can, and to me it's unfair. Blanket statements, besides being inaccurate, are just unfair, and for whatever reason they spread like wildfire. I mean, one person starts a blanket statement and before you know, it's just caught fire, like lithops need to be watered 2 times a year or 4 times a year. As if you could make a blanket statement about that. If you live in Florida where you are humid up to the gills, it's going to be way different than if you live in the middle of the desert and they're in full sun all the time. There are so many variables for how much water plants need, and even more so than the care itself, the variables, there are more variables on what the plant is planted in, what your atmosphere is like. What atmosphere isn't the word I'm looking for, but what the conditions are where your plant is, and what type of pot it has, and those type of things, that they're actually way more impactful on your plant in the long run than how many times you water a lot of times. So you can totally kill a lithop by watering it 4 times a year, by drowning it. And you can totally kill a lithop by watering it 4 times a year because it doesn't have enough water and it will shrivel up. Both of those can happen with a 4 times a year policy, depending on where you live, what your potting medium is, your pot size, and all of those kind of things. So I don't feel like blanket statements are helpful, and I feel like they're a really big red flag, because most of the time when people throw them out, they don't know what they're talking about, or else they wouldn't throw out a blanket statement like that. All right, so the second kind of mark, I guess, of bad advice is assuring someone that because it works for me, then I'm positive it will work for you. So statements like, no, 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 no. Trust me, I have had aloes all of my life, and they love being in an east window, and they get watered twice a week. Again, I'm incorporating blanket statements into that, but it's not really blanket when they're talking. You don't perceive it as a blanket when they're talking about what they're doing, because it's just what they're doing. But if they're telling you that if you do that, then it will work, then that's a blanket statement. And unless they have asked enough follow-up questions to have the amount of information that they need to say something like that, then be wary. And you can ask, you can make some blanket statements and say this is kind of the schedule I would suggest for watering or whatever, but you need information. You need to know what the potting medium is and what kind of light it's getting and what the average temperatures are, etc., before you can give advice like that. And yeah, let me think here. Something else on that I was gonna say. Yeah, if someone knows what they're talking about and they're talking about how they take care of their plants, they will give you the information you need to know if that is applicable to you. So for example, they might say, like for me, if I were to say, I keep my peperomia in a south window and they do great, that's not helpful for you. But if I say, I live in northern Idaho and we get, about X amount of sunlight, and the sun goes down significantly in the winter, and, and this is what they're growing in or whatever, and this works well for me, then based on that information, you can know, okay, well, is mine planted in something similar? Yes, no. Is it in the similar window? Yes, no. Am I in a similar type environment, weather-wise and all of that? Are my house temperatures similar, humidity, etc.? And then you can know if it's going to be advice that is going to help you or not. And if you know that, if you know all those details, then you can know which part of the advice you might need to change for your environment or your habitat. And so that's, to me, yeah, why it's helpful, because if you do the exact same thing in a completely different environment, you're going to have completely different results, because it's not the same. It's not the same at all. And to me, this is why there's so many fights online with people being like, no, my way is the right way. I know, I have raised these for years and they are I believe you, I really do. But everyone isn't living like you are, and everyone doesn't have the same conditions. And unless they're giving that much information with their advice, it's dangerous, because it leads to people just blindly following, thinking there's some kind of formula for plants. They're living, breathing things that have lives, and things happen. There are pests. There are all kinds of things. Their environments change, and so their needs are going to change because they're alive. So we have to adjust with that. Let's see here. Okay, so when people are giving advice online, I'm trying to think how to word this here. There are several different categories, not really, but there are several different types of it. There we go. Several different types of advice givers, and that are dangerous. And the first is the people that give advice when they don't have any experience with the plant at all. And their advice might sound like, this is one category of, my mother has grown these for years and she always, whatever. Again, with the blanket statements. It seems like the blanket statements are almost always present with bad advice. Yeah, for whatever reason. I know a guy who grows these professionally, and he says that that this is what his work. Well, great, but you don't have any actual experience in that, and you don't know the context that that advice was given in, and you don't know, you know, unless it's your plant, you can't know all of the different factors that you need to know really to be giving that advice. And I wish people would just not, I don't understand the compulsion to give advice when you don't have any experience with something. I often tell people, I don't know, I've never had one of those, or I don't know, I've raised, you know, some, but never really got into a great, a great rhythm with them to where I feel like I can give, you know, advice that's helpful. And if I am just quoting facts about a plant, that's a little different, you know, saying, well, this is where they're native and this is, you know, their growth habitat and yada, yada, yada. I rarely do that when I don't own the plants either, but I have no problem with people doing that and just talking plain facts. But if you're talking care and advice with care and people are asking for help with a specific problem, to give advice when you don't own the plant and you don't have any experience, unless you make that really clear, I don't have one of these, but this is what I've heard. Okay, that's fine. But unless you're using that caveat and going, I don't actually know personally about this, it seems really unfair and misleading, and it's hugely prevalent online for whatever reason. But so the next kind of category, I guess, would be someone that's giving advice based on something just that they read, not even that they know someone, so they kind of have indirect contact with the plant. They just read something online. They just read a blog. They just read, you know, yeah, the latest blog on lithops, and they saw that it said only water them, you know, 4 times a year, and that you should, I don't know, you know, I'm blanking out on some of these really common blanket statements that people make, especially about lithops. For whatever reason, people love the blanket statements. But I'm just shocked at how many people do this, that they read a blog and then when someone says, hey, I'm having a problem with mealybugs, they go, oh, you know, all you have to do is take alcohol in a spray bottle and spray it on and it'll get rid of them. Okay, do you know that? Like, did you try it and did it work for you? Or did you just read that it worked for someone else? Or you just read that it worked for a lot of other people? Then let them say that it worked for them. But yeah, and the other thing is a lot of people seem to be commenting after owning plants for weeks or even a couple months and giving advice on the care and saying, no, my plant, I know this variety likes this lighting. A lot of succulents are very slow growing and they take longer than a couple months to etiolate. So you can't know in a couple of months if it likes the window that you put it in. You just can't. Now, some etiolate really quickly, and so you can tell really fast if they're unhappy, but a lot of them don't. And so watch for people not giving time, and a lot of times it's hard to tell, which we'll get to what to do about it. And a lot of times it's hard to tell, which is why I'm like, ask questions, and we'll get to that. But timeline is kind of important to suss out if someone is telling you from experience or just quoting something that they read or saw someone else say was working for them. And yeah, there's something else I was going to say about that.